Physical and emotional conditions tend to slip in and out of vogue, with a lot of sloppy diagnosing of ourselves and others coming with it. We find it awfully easy to label a moody friend bipolar, notwithstanding the fact that only 2.6% of the world's population actually suffers from the condition, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. Ditto obsessive-compulsive disorder, which everyone on the planet seems to think they have at some point or another, even reducing the label to an adjective, I'm so OCD, simply because they like to keep their desk neat. But if you're not part of the 2% of all people who actually have a clinical diagnosable case of the condition, you're probably just tidy. As for hypoglycemia, please, unless you're diabetic and have just injected yourself with insulin and skipped a meal, odds are you're just tired, hungry, and looking for an excuse for a snack. So eat a Snickers and pipe down. It's much the same way with narcissism. The actual incidence of true narcissistic personality disorder is just 1% in the general population, sneaking up to 3% in certain groups, such as people in their 20s who have yet to be humbled a bit by the challenges and setbacks of adult life. The numbers climb much higher among self-selected populations of people who have already entered psychotherapy for some emotional condition, ranging anywhere from 2% for the average therapy patient to 16% for institutionalized patients. The behaviors that characterize the narcissistic personality are spelled out starkly by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or DSM, psychology's universally relied upon field guide to the mind, which defines the condition as, in effect, 3 conditions: a toxic mashup of grandiosity, an unquenchable thirst for admiration, and a near total blindness to how other people see you. But those are only the broadest features. There is, too, a lack of empathy in narcissists, an utter inability not only to understand what other people are feeling, but how they may be responsible for those feelings, especially when they're bad. Narcissists are afflicted with a bottomless appetite as well, for recognition, attention, glory, rewards. And it's a zero-sum thing. Every moment a narcissist spends listening to another party guest tell a story is a moment in which the stage has been surrendered. Most people welcome that give and take. It's the social part of socializing, and listening can provide a welcome break from the performance demands of telling a story or otherwise holding court. In the karaoke cycle that is life, we all get our turns on the stage and our turns in the crowd. The narcissist withers in, indeed rages against, any dying of the light. Entitlement is another part of the narcissistic profile, a sense that attention and rewards are not only expected, but owing, accompanied by an always-ready rage when those goodies aren't delivered. Perhaps the worst expression of narcissism is that sense of entitlement, says research psychologist Robin Edelstein of the University of Michigan. It usually exists side by side with a terrible exploitativeness, a willingness to take advantage of other people, but a brittleness and defensiveness if they feel someone is taking advantage of them. Brad Bushman of Ohio State University echoes this. I'm an aggression researcher, he says, and when it comes to narcissists, nothing sets aggression off so much as that sense of entitlement. Narcissism is not a standalone condition. It's part of the suite of 10 personality disorders, which also include paranoid, borderline, histrionic, antisocial, dependent, avoidant, rigid, schizoid, and schizotypal personalities. The last 2, as their names suggest, include features of schizophrenia but are not the same as that full-blown condition, which is in a diagnostic class almost by itself. Personality disorders are among the most stubborn conditions psychologists treat because they're what's known as ego-syntonic, which is shrink talk for the idea that the patients buy into what their minds are telling them. You're not paranoid, people really are after you. You're not pathologically rigid, there really are certain ways all things must be done at all times. And you're not narcissistic, you really are more talented, more important, and just plain better than everybody else. Anxiety conditions such as phobias and OCD are what's known as ego dystonic. The person with a morbid fear of spiders or snakes or elevators knows it's nuts but can't control it. The obsessive-compulsive who devotes 3 hours a day to hand-washing or checking to make sure the stove is turned off recognizes the madness of the behavior and would much rather be doing other things, but the psychic pull of the rituals is too great. When anxiety sufferers come into therapy, they deeply want to change. When people with a personality disorder at last enter treatment, it's typically because family or friends push them there. Absent that kind of coercion, they really see no need to change. This is especially true of narcissists, who not only don't think they need a doctor, but are convinced they're smarter than the doctor. Not every case of narcissism is the clinical, capital N kind. Like all personality disorders, it exists on a sort of continuum, with people with ordinary self-esteem at one end, the floridly narcissistic at the other, and uncounted little gradations in between. A whole lot of people are now moving up that scale, developing cases of subclinical or lowercase n narcissism that may not shut down governments but may cause plenty of personal harm to the people around them. In 2008, a team of researchers published a study in the Journal of Personality looking at narcissism among college students over a 27-year period from 1979 to 2006. Their paper was what's known as a meta-analysis, a recrunching of the data from 85 separate narcissism studies, covering a collective 16,475 subjects. All of the people surveyed had been administered the Narcissistic Personality Inventory, or NPI, a 40-item questionnaire that requires subjects to choose between essentially opposite statements, such as, "I insist upon getting the respect that is due me," or "I usually get the respect that I deserve." "Sometimes I tell good stories," or "Everybody likes to hear my stories." "I can read people like a book," or "People are sometimes hard to understand." "I am more capable than other people," or "There is a lot I can learn from other people." In some cases, both statements can be true. You may in fact be more capable than other people and still have things to learn from them. But the forced choice nature of the questions is designed to make people own up to the traits that best describe them, even if that's not all there is to them. The average person scores slightly below 16 on the NPI. Move above 20 and you're flirting with narcissism. Broadly, people diagnosed with narcissism can be divided into 3 groups: the power group, the special person group, and the grandiose exhibitionist group, depending on the mix of descriptions they choose for themselves. But all of them are still narcissists. Since 1979, the 2008 study found, there has been a 30% increase in overall NPI scores in the sample population, with more than 2/3 of contemporary college students scoring higher than what the mean score was from 1979 through 1985. The exact same test has been given every year, says Bushman, who was one of the co-authors of the study, and the narcissism rates are increasing over time. Like all psychological surveys, the NPI will never be as empirically accurate as, say, a blood test or a cholesterol count. But when tools like this stick around as long as this one has, and when they're used as widely as this one is, they've usually proven their powerful if imperfect merit. What's more, even before people take the test, both experts and non-experts can often predict who will score high based on their telltale behavior. Narcissists thrive when there's an opportunity for glory, but are uninterested in the collaborative work that leads to a greater good for a larger group. They bristle and bitch when their talents are challenged, but never consider the possibility that those talents may be less than they believe them to be, or that there is at least room for improvement. For narcissists, setbacks are not opportunities to learn, they're problems caused by somebody else who got in their way or sabotaged their plans. Narcissists tend to blame others rather than to own it, says Nathaniel Fast, professor of management and organizational behavior at the University of Southern California. There's a fragility to the narcissistic personality. a pressure to be superior, and the implicit need to prove how great they are. It's that pressure, that panic, that drives narcissists to cut corners and break rules. The plagiarist or the academic cheater, whose shame at acting unethically or fear of being caught is no match for the thrill of the unearned A+ or the fraudulent byline. Narcissistic students have higher levels of academic misconduct, and we think that's because they don't feel guilt, says psychologist Amy Brunell of Ohio State University at Newark, who has studied narcissism and academic dishonesty. We asked them about their impressions of other students, and they felt that other people were cheating more than they actually were. But people who merely have high self-esteem as opposed to narcissism don't cheat as much. That kind of behavior takes its toll on everyone. By the time the cheater has aced the course and moved on, she's thrown off the curve for the rest of the class and perhaps won the internship or post-grad job that honest students were gunning for too. By the time the woman who falls in love with a narcissist realizes he will never adore her nearly as much as he adores himself, she may already have given up her apartment, moved into his, and never suspected that he's cheating with the new account executive in his office, whom he insists he doesn't find the slightest bit pretty. By the time the Human Resources Department realized that the vice president it hired to manage an office of 200 people is a raging narcissist, he's probably browbeaten dozens of employees, filched credit for work they've done, and led the firm to a quarterly loss. Because, never mind what all the trained analysts told him about why he shouldn't invest in new product development till next year, he reckoned his judgment was better and smarter and bolder than theirs. There can, surely, be profound good that comes from narcissists, or at least from their works. However wise and humble and spiritual Mohandas Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. were, they surely got a charge out of rousing hundreds of thousands, even millions of people with the sound of their voice and the power of their ideas. Had they been more timid men, less inclined toward or delighted by the power that comes from leadership, they might never have stepped up to lead at all. Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin saved the world from polio with their competing and very different vaccines. But it was the race to be first, to be the man who would be celebrated for beating the disease, that helped impel their work. Dwight Eisenhower led the Allies to victory during World War II, and for that he was rightly celebrated. But if you don't think he quietly enjoyed wearing an explosively beribboned uniform and a title like Supreme Allied Commander, you don't know much about human nature. It's the same confidence, sometimes arrogance, that has allowed inventors and industrialists like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk to press on in improbable ventures against extraordinary odds and create things that improve the world in big and meaningful ways, even if they make few friends doing it. Still, the heroic narcissist, the ingenious narcissist, the courageous narcissist are not the most common breeds. It's the everyday, self-obsessed, pay-attention-to-me narcissist who is. Almost anywhere you look in your world, you have an ever bigger chance of finding one of them. In your office, in your social circle, in your arms, in yourself. If you don't know how to recognize them in time, to avoid them if you can, or to manage them if you're already entangled, the price can be high. And it can be higher still if the narcissist is you. For too many people, the very idea of love, that greatest and most other-directed of human impulses, is folding in on itself, with admiration turning to exhibitionism, charity to greed, altruism to appetite. We are more and more living in a mirror world, with the most prominent sight being the reflected one. And too many of us like that view just fine.